Arizona Territory, 1885. The unforgiving sun beat down on Gabriel Zimmerman's back as he guided his horse along the edge of the Verde River. At 23, Gabriel had already spent more years in the saddle than most men twice his age. His lean frame and sun-bronzed skin testified to a life lived outdoors, while his clear blue eyes contrasted sharply with his dark brown hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. Though young, the faint lines at the corners of his eyes spoke of someone who smiled easily, despite the harsh realities of frontier life. It was pure chance that brought him to this remote stretch of water, a detour forced by rumors of bandits on his usual route back to his employer's ranch. As his mount picked its way carefully along the rocky riverbank, Gabriel's thoughts drifted to the herd of cattle he'd have to move at dawn. The glint of something unnatural in the water caught his eye. Squinting against the harsh light, he made out what appeared to be fabric caught in an eddy, swirling against the rocky shore. Then he saw her, a woman's body, face down, dark hair fanning out in the current. "Sweet Jesus," he muttered, immediately dismounting and splashing into the shallows. The woman was limp and cold when he dragged her to shore. Her long black hair plastered against her face, her traditional Apache dress sodden and heavy. Gabriel had heard stories about the local Apache bands, but he'd had little interaction with them. The invisible boundaries between their worlds rarely crossed. Without hesitation, he turned her onto her side, pushing the water from her lungs as he'd once seen done with a ranch hand who'd fallen into a water trough during a drunken celebration. Water spilled from her mouth, but she remained motionless. Desperate, he pressed his hands against her back repeatedly, praying to a god he wasn't sure listened to cowboys. Just when he was about to give up, she convulsed violently, coughing up river water. Her eyes flew open, deep, obsidian eyes that locked with his in confusion and fear. "You're safe now," Gabriel said softly, though he knew she likely wouldn't understand English. He kept his movements slow, non-threatening. "I won't hurt you." She scrambled backward, pressing herself against a boulder, her chest heaving as she gasped for air. Her hand moved to her belt, searching for a weapon that wasn't there. "Raven Nighthawk," she said suddenly, pressing her hand to her chest. Her voice was hoarse from the river water, but her English, though accented, was clear. Gabriel blinked in surprise. "You speak English?" "My father insisted," she replied, still wary. "He traded with whites." Her gaze darted around, assessing her situation. "Why did you save me?" The bluntness of her question caught him off guard. "I couldn't just let you drown." A flash of something, disappointment, crossed her features before she masked it. "Perhaps it would have been better if you had." Before Gabriel could respond, distant voices carried on the wind, men shouting, horses approaching. Fear flooded Raven's face. "They cannot find me here," she whispered urgently, attempting to stand but faltering. "Who?" Gabriel asked, instinctively moving between her and the direction of the voices. "Men who believe I stole something precious." "I did not, but they will not listen." She clutched his arm. "Please, if they find me." The urgency in her eyes made his decision for him. Without another word, he helped her to her feet, supporting her weight as they moved toward his horse. The animal nickered nervously, sensing the tension. "Can you ride?" Gabriel asked, already knowing they had little choice. She nodded, though pain flashed across her face. "I was born on horseback." Gabriel helped her mount, then swung up behind her, cradling her still shivering form against his chest as he urged his horse away from the river, into the cover of the mesquite and cottonwoods. As they disappeared into the brush, Gabriel couldn't shake the feeling that his impulsive act of mercy had just altered the course of his life. What had he gotten himself into? And who was this woman he'd just rescued from certain death only to possibly ride them both into danger? The sun was setting by the time they reached the small line shack where Gabriel occasionally stayed when working the northern pastures of the Double Bar Ranch. The humble one-room structure stood solitary against the darkening sky, its weathered boards offering sparse protection from the elements, but, more importantly, from prying eyes. Raven had remained silent for most of their journey, occasionally tensing at sounds only she seemed to hear. Gabriel found himself hyper-aware of her presence. The faint scent of river water mixed with something like sage, the way she sat straight back despite her ordeal, the occasional shiver that passed through her body. "It's not much," Gabriel said as he helped her dismount. but it's dry and safe. She stumbled slightly, fatigue evident in the slump of her shoulders. Her dress had dried somewhat during their ride, but still clung uncomfortably to her slim frame. Now that they were safe, Gabriel took a moment to really look at her. She was perhaps 20, with high cheekbones and a proud set to her jaw. Her dark eyes missed nothing, taking in the sparse interior of the shack with a quick, assessing glance. "I need to tend to my horse," Gabriel said, gesturing to the small lean-to that served as a rudimentary stable. "There are some spare clothes in the trunk by the bed. They'll be too big, but they're dry." When he returned after settling his horse, he found Raven dressed in one of his shirts, the sleeves rolled up multiple times, and a pair of his trousers cinched tight with a piece of rope. She'd hung her dress near the small stove, where Gabriel now built a fire. "Thank you," she said, her voice still carrying that musical accent. "For the clothes. For saving me. Though I'm not certain you've done yourself any favors." Gabriel shrugged as he set a pot of coffee to boil. "Couldn't leave you there. Most white men would have. I'm not most men." He busied himself with preparing a simple meal from the supplies kept stocked in the shack. "Can you tell me what happened? How you ended up in the river?" Raven's fingers twisted nervously in the hem of his oversized shirt. "My people have camps near the eastern tributaries. I was gathering plants for medicine when 3 white men approached." Her voice hardened. "They accused me of stealing a gold medallion from their camp. When I denied it, She swallowed hard. "They said they would search me. I ran. There was a struggle at the riverbank. I fell, or was pushed. The current was stronger than I expected." Gabriel handed her a tin cup of coffee, which she accepted gratefully. "And did you steal from them?" She looked him directly in the eyes. "No, but they would not have believed me regardless." "Why were you alone?" "It's dangerous country." A shadow passed over her face. "I am, not like other Apache women. I was educated at a mission school for a time, before my father took me away. I know too much of the white world for some of my people's comfort, and too much of Apache ways for yours. I often find myself alone." Gabriel nodded slowly, understanding isolation all too well. Orphaned at 14 and making his own way ever since, he'd learned that belonging was a luxury few could afford on the frontier. "You should rest," he said, noticing how she fought to keep her eyes open. "Take the bed. I'll sleep by the stove." She hesitated. "Those men may still be searching. If they find us, they won't," Gabriel assured her, more confidently than he felt. "Not tonight, at least. Tomorrow, we can figure out what to do." Raven stood, wavering slightly on her feet. "I am in your debt, Gabriel Zimmerman." "No debt," he replied. "Just rest." As she settled onto the narrow cot, Gabriel found himself wondering how a simple detour had led him to harbor an Apache woman in his employer's lined shack, an act that could cost him his job, if not his life. The Arizona territory had an uneasy peace with the local tribes, but prejudices ran deep on both sides. And if those men hunting Raven were as dangerous as she feared? He stared into the flames of the small stove, questions multiplying in his mind. Who was this woman really? What had she done to deserve such pursuit? And why did he feel so compelled to protect her? Outside, an owl called into the darkness, its cry a lonely echo of his thoughts. Dawn broke with an urgency that startled Gabriel from his fitful sleep on the floor. Something had awakened him, a sound out of place in the early morning stillness. He reached instinctively for the revolver beside his makeshift bed, then froze as he saw Raven already standing by the window, peering through a crack in the shutters. "Riders," she whispered, her body tense as a drawn bowstring. 3 of them, coming from the east. Gabriel joined her, careful to stay hidden as he observed the approaching men. They rode with purpose, scanning the terrain as they came, not ranch hands or travelers, but men on a mission. "The same ones?" he asked quietly. Raven nodded, her face grim. "I recognized the man with the red bandana. He was their leader." Gabriel assessed their options quickly. The shack offered little defense, and they were outnumbered. Fighting would be a last resort. "There's a ravine about a mile west of here. If we can reach it unseen, we can follow it north to the main ranch." "You would take me to your employer's home?" Disbelief colored her voice. "No," Gabriel admitted. "But there are horses there, supplies. We could." A sharp rap on the door cut him off. "Hello, the shack. Anybody home?" Gabriel placed a finger to his lips, gesturing for Raven to move to the back of the room. He mussed his hair, rubbed his eyes to appear as though just waking, and opened the door just enough to peer out. 3 men sat on horseback, just as Raven had said. The leader, distinguished by his red bandana, smiled without warmth. "Morning, Cowboy. Sorry to disturb your rest. Name's Fletcher. My friends and I are tracking a thief, Apache woman, pretty little thing. Stole a family heirloom yesterday. Seen anyone matching that description?" Gabriel yawned deliberately. "No, sir. Been here since yesterday afternoon. Haven't seen a soul." Fletcher's eyes narrowed, surveying what he could see of the shack's interior. "Mind if we have a look around? Just to be thorough." "This is double-bar property," Gabriel replied evenly. "Mr. Harrison doesn't take kindly to strangers poking around his land." "Harrison, eh?" Fletcher exchanged glances with his companions. "Well, we don't want any trouble with him. But if you do happen to spot this woman, she's got something that belongs to my family. Real sentimental value. There'd be a reward for anyone who helps us find her." "I'll keep an eye out," Gabriel promised, his hand resting casually near his holstered gun. Fletcher tipped his hat, the gesture at odds with the coldness in his eyes. "Much obliged. We'll be moving on then." Gabriel watched as they rode a short distance away, huddling in conversation, occasionally glancing back at the shack. They weren't leaving, just regrouping. "They don't believe you," Raven said softly from behind him. "No," Gabriel agreed, closing the door. "And they'll be watching the shack now." He moved quickly, gathering what few supplies they might need. "There's a back window. It's small, but we can fit through it. We'll have to move fast and stay low." Raven was already gathering her still damp dress. "I've brought danger to your doorstep," she said, her voice tight with regret. Gabriel paused, struck by the genuine concern in her eyes. "My doorstep's seen worse," he said with a half-smile. "Come on." They slipped through the window into the pale morning light, staying in the shadow of the shack before making a dash for a stand of scrub brush. As they crouched behind the meager cover, Gabriel glanced back to see Fletcher dismounting, approaching the shack with determined strides. "Run," he whispered to Raven. "Don't stop until you reach those rocks." They sprinted across the open ground, the shouts of the men behind them confirming their discovery. A gunshot cracked the morning stillness, the bullet kicking up dust several yards to their right, a warning rather than a serious attempt to hit them. Gabriel and Raven reached the rocks, pressing themselves against the cool stone as they caught their breath. The men were mounting up, preparing to give chase. "Why are they so determined?" Gabriel panted, risking a glance around the boulder. Raven pulled something from inside her dress, a gold medallion on a chain, glinting in the early light. "Because this is worth more than they told you." Gabriel stared at the object, then at her. "You said you didn't steal it." "I didn't," she replied, her eyes flashing. "It was my mother's. Fletcher's partner won it from my father in a dishonest card game years ago. I merely took back what was ours." The sound of approaching hooves cut their conversation short. Gabriel pointed to a narrow game trail leading down into the ravine he'd mentioned. "That way. Hurry." As they scrambled down the rocky path, Gabriel's mind raced. Everything had changed in an instant. He was now actively fleeing with a woman being pursued by armed men, men who believed they were justified in their chase. And he had only her word that the medallion rightfully belonged to her family. Yet something in her fierce determination, in the way she'd clutched that medallion like a talisman, made him believe her. Or perhaps he simply wanted to. Either way, there was no turning back now. The ravine provided temporary shelter, its steep walls and winding path making it difficult for mounted men to follow. Gabriel and Raven moved quickly, picking their way over rocks and through patches of prickly pear cactus. The morning heat was building, the air already shimmering above the sandy ground. "We need to find water," Gabriel said, noting how Raven's breathing had become labored. Despite her strength, her near drowning the day before had clearly taken a toll. "There is a spring," she replied, pointing ahead. "If I remember correctly, my people used it in drier seasons." Gabriel raised an eyebrow. "You know this area well." "This was our territory before the reservation boundaries were drawn," she said simply. "My father taught me every waterhole, every pass, every place a person could hide or hunt." They continued in silence for a time, both alert for any sign of pursuit. Eventually, the ravine opened into a small canyon where, true to Raven's word, a spring bubbled from between rocks, creating a small pool surrounded by unexpected greenery. They drank deeply, the cool water reviving their spirits. Gabriel refilled his canteen while Raven bathed her face, the water droplets catching the sunlight as they ran down her cheeks. "You could have left me," she said suddenly. "At the shack. Told them where to find me. Saved yourself the trouble." Gabriel shrugged, uncomfortable with her direct gaze. "Wouldn't have been right. Most men would define right differently when it involves helping an Apache." He met her eyes then. "Maybe I've seen enough of how most men treat others who are different." Something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits who had both known what it meant to stand outside the circle. Raven pulled the medallion from her dress again, holding it so Gabriel could see it properly. It was larger than a silver dollar, with intricate engravings surrounding a central design that appeared to be a rising sun with 13 rays. "My mother was not Apache," she explained. "She was Mexican, from a family with Spanish ancestry. This medallion has been passed through her family for generations. When she married my father, it caused great controversy on both sides. But they loved each other deeply." She traced the design with her finger. "After she died of fever, this was all I had of her. Then 3 winters ago, my father lost it in that card game. He was never the same afterward, as if he'd lost her all over again. He died last spring." "I'm sorry," Gabriel said softly. "Yesterday, I recognized one of Fletcher's men in town. I followed him, saw the medallion. I waited until they were drunk and took it back." Her jaw set firmly. It was not stealing. It was reclaiming what is mine by blood and by right. Gabriel nodded slowly. "I believe you." She looked surprised, then grateful. "Thank you. But believing me does not make our situation any less dangerous. Fletcher will not give up easily." "Then we need a plan," Gabriel said, scanning the canyon walls. "We can't keep running forever." "No," Raven agreed, her expression turning thoughtful. "Perhaps we should stop running altogether." "What do you mean?" "Fletcher wants this medallion because he believes it is valuable. Maybe it is time to let him believe he can have it. On our terms." Gabriel frowned. "You'd give it up after all this?" A slow smile spread across Raven's face, the first real smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her features, lighting her eyes with a cleverness that took his breath away. "I said let him believe he can have it. I did not say I would actually give it to him." Gabriel found himself returning her smile, an unfamiliar warmth spreading through his chest. "What did you have in mind?" As Raven outlined her plan, Gabriel realized he was seeing yet another side of this remarkable woman, strategic, cunning, and unafraid to take risks. It was becoming increasingly clear why she had described herself as unlike other Apache women. She defied any simple categorization, moving between worlds with a grace that belied the difficulty of such a life. And as she spoke, eyes flashing with intelligence and determination, Gabriel found himself drawn to her in a way that transcended mere admiration. It was a feeling both unfamiliar and exhilarating, like riding a half-broken horse, terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. But there was no time to examine these feelings. Fletcher and his men would not be far behind, and if Raven's plan was to work, they needed to move quickly. The medallion caught the sunlight as she tucked it away once more, its golden surface seemingly alive with possibilities and dangers yet to come. The trading post at Cedar Creek was little more than a collection of weathered buildings at a crossroads, but it served as a gathering place for travelers, ranchers, and occasionally, members of the nearby Apache bands who came to trade under uneasy truces. By mid-afternoon, Gabriel and Raven had made their way there, approaching cautiously from the north. Gabriel entered first, his hat pulled low over his eyes. The interior was dim after the bright sunlight, the air heavy with the scent of tobacco, leather, and coffee. A few customers browsed the shelves while the proprietor, a heavy-set man with a gray walrus mustache, tallied figures in a ledger. "Afternoon," Gabriel nodded, affecting a casual demeanor as he purchased supplies, jerky, coffee, ammunition for his revolver. All the while, he kept watch through the dusty window for any sign of Fletcher and his men. "Expecting company?" the proprietor asked, noting Gabriel's frequent glances outside. "Just cautious," Gabriel replied. "Heard there might be trouble on the trails. 3 men causing problems." The proprietor snorted. "Those 3 were in here this morning. Looking for an Apache woman they claim robbed them. Offered a reward." He studied Gabriel's face. You haven't seen anyone matching that description, have you? Young, pretty, probably wearing traditional dress. Gabriel maintained a neutral expression. Can't say that I have. Hmm. The man didn't look convinced. Well, if you do, be careful. Those fellas didn't strike me as the forgiving type. Especially that Fletcher. Got mean eyes, that one. I'll keep that in mind. As Gabriel exited the store, he caught sight of Raven waiting where he'd left her, hidden behind an abandoned storage shed. She'd changed back into her now-dry dress, her hair braided in the Apache style. The transformation was striking. She looked more confident, more herself. They were here this morning. Gabriel informed her quietly as he approached. The proprietor says they've spread word about the reward. Raven nodded grimly. Then the next part of the plan becomes more dangerous. Are you certain you wish to continue? This is not your fight. Gabriel found himself reaching for her hand without thinking. I'm in it now. Besides, a man needs something worth fighting for every now and then. Her fingers tightened around his briefly before she pulled away, but the ghost of a smile touched her lips. Then let us proceed. The letter. Gabriel patted his vest pocket where he'd placed the carefully written note. Raven's handwriting surprisingly elegant, a testament to her mission school education. The note directed Fletcher to an abandoned mine shaft several miles east of town, promising the return of the medallion in exchange for being left in peace. I'll deliver it to the saloon as planned, Gabriel confirmed. Everyone in town will know Fletcher received a message. It will seem legitimate, and I will prepare the mine. Raven's expression grew solemn. Be careful, Gabriel. These men have already shown they are willing to kill for this medallion. I'll meet you at the arranged spot by sundown, he promised. As they parted ways, Gabriel couldn't shake a sense of foreboding. The plan was sound, but relied on Fletcher's greed overcoming his caution. If anything went wrong, he pushed the thought aside. They had committed to this course of action. Now they would see it through, whatever the cost. The saloon was busier than the trading post, cowboys and miners seeking respite from the afternoon heat. Gabriel spotted Fletcher immediately, holding court at a corner table, his two companions flanking him like loyal dogs. The red bandana stood out like a warning flag. Gabriel approached the bar, ordering a whiskey he had no intention of drinking. He made a show of asking the bartender about work in the area, all the while positioning himself where Fletcher would notice him, the young cowboy from the shack. It didn't take long. Well, look who it is, Fletcher's voice cut through the ambient noise. Our early morning friend. Gabriel turned slowly, feigning surprise. Do I know you, mister? Fletcher approached, his companions trailing behind. Don't play dumb, boy. You're the one who was harboring that Apache thief. Conversations throughout the saloon quieted as patrons sensed potential trouble. Gabriel stood his ground, aware of all eyes upon them. I don't know what you're talking about, he replied evenly. But if you've got a message for someone, I was just about to head back to the double bar. I could deliver it for you. Fletcher's eyes narrowed. What game are you playing? No game. Just being neighborly. Gabriel shrugged. But if you're not interested. Wait. Fletcher studied him intently. What makes you think I have a message? Gabriel maintained an innocent expression. Heard you were looking for someone. Figured you might want to get word to them. That's all. A calculating look crossed Fletcher's face. As a matter of fact, I do have something to say to a certain party, but I prefer to deliver my messages personally. Suit yourself, Gabriel replied, turning back to the bar. Fletcher grabbed his arm. Unless, of course, you already know where to find her. The saloon had gone completely silent now, every patron watching the confrontation unfold. This was the most dangerous moment in their plan, the point where Gabriel needed to appear reluctant, yet ultimately cooperative. He sighed heavily, as if weighing a difficult decision. Look, I don't want any trouble. I've got a good job at the double bar, and Mr. Harrison doesn't tolerate his hands getting into scrapes. Then tell me where she is, Fletcher pressed, his grip tightening. Gabriel pulled his arm free. I don't know exactly, but she left this at the shack. He reached slowly into his vest pocket, extracting the folded note. Found it after you fellas rode off. Fletcher snatched the paper, unfolding it with eager fingers. His eyes scanned the contents, a slow smile spreading across his face. Well, he murmured. Seems our little thief wants to make a trade. He looked up at Gabriel, suspicion evident in his gaze. And you just happened to find this. Gabriel shrugged again. Like I said, I don't want trouble. Figured delivering that might keep me out of whatever business you've got with her. Fletcher studied him for a long moment, then chuckled. You're either very smart or very stupid, Cowboy. I haven't decided which. He folded the note and tucked it into his shirt pocket. Thanks for the delivery. Now I suggest you ride back to the double bar and forget you ever met that Apache woman. For your own good. Gabriel nodded, finishing his whiskey in one swallow. Already forgotten. As he left the saloon, he could feel Fletcher's eyes boring into his back. The first part of the plan had worked. Fletcher had taken the bait. Now everything depended on Raven's preparations at the mine and Gabriel reaching their meeting point before Fletcher and his men discovered they were being led into a trap. The sun was already beginning its descent toward the western horizon. Time was running short. The abandoned silver mine stood like a gaping wound in the hillside, its timber supports weathered and groaning in the evening breeze. Gabriel approached cautiously, leading his horse rather than riding, every sense alert for danger. The designated meeting spot was a small clearing just beyond a bend in the trail, close enough to the mine to monitor Fletcher's arrival, but far enough to escape if necessary. He found Raven waiting, perched on a boulder, still as a hunting hawk. She acknowledged his arrival with a nod. It is done, she said simply. Fletcher took the message. Yes, he was suspicious, but the lure of the medallion was too strong to resist. Raven slid down from her position. I have prepared the mine as planned. The support beams near the entrance are weak. With the right pressure, they will collapse. Gabriel surveyed the mine entrance visible through the trees. You're certain this will work? If they suspect a trap, Fletcher's greed will blind him. Men like him always believe they are cleverer than those they pursue. There was a hardness in her voice that spoke of past experiences. But we must be in position before they arrive. They secured Gabriel's horse a safe distance away, then made their way to their observation point, a rocky outcropping that afforded a clear view of the mine entrance and the approach trail. As they settled in to wait, a comfortable silence fell between them. The setting sun bathed the landscape in golden light, transforming the rugged terrain into something almost beautiful. What will you do? Gabriel asked finally. After this is over. Raven considered the question, her profile thoughtful against the deepening sky. Return to my people, I suppose. Though I am not always welcome there. My ways are too influenced by the white world. And yet not welcome in that world either, Gabriel added softly. She turned to him, surprise evident in her expression. You understand. More than you might think. I've never quite fit anywhere myself. Orphaned young, raised by whoever would take me in. Always the outsider. Raven studied him with new interest. Is that why you helped me? You saw yourself in me. Gabriel shook his head slowly. I helped because it was right. I stayed because. He hesitated, suddenly unsure how to express the feelings that had been growing within him since he'd pulled her from the river. Because I wanted to know you, he finished simply. Something shifted in Raven's gaze, a softening, a vulnerability she had kept carefully hidden until now. She reached out, her fingers lightly touching his. Gabriel Zimmerman, she said softly. You are unlike any man I have known. Before he could respond, the distant sound of horses broke the moment. They both tensed, moving deeper into the shadows of their hiding place. 3 riders appeared on the trail, Fletcher in the lead, his red bandana visible even in the fading light. They come, Raven whispered, her hand moving to the medallion hidden beneath her dress. Remember, once they enter the mine, we will have only moments to trigger the collapse and escape. Gabriel nodded, his attention fixed on the approaching men. Fletcher dismounted near the mine entrance, instructing his companions to secure the horses. He withdrew a lantern from his saddlebag, lit it, and peered into the dark opening. Apache woman, he called out, his voice echoing slightly. I've come as requested. Show yourself, and let's make this trade. Silence answered him. Fletcher turned to his companions, speaking too quietly for Gabriel and Raven to hear. One man drew his pistol, scanning the surrounding area nervously. This doesn't feel right, Gabriel murmured. They're too cautious. Raven's grip tightened on his arm. Wait. Fletcher's greed will win out. He will not resist entering. True to her prediction, Fletcher eventually gestured impatiently toward the mine. She must be waiting inside. Johnson, you stay here with the horses. Davis, you're with me. Fletcher and the second man entered the mine, the lantern light diminishing as they moved deeper into the tunnel. The third man remained outside, gun drawn, his posture tense. "Now," Raven whispered, sliding down from their position. They moved silently through the underbrush, approaching the trigger mechanism Raven had rigged, a series of ropes attached to the weakened support beams. One strong pull would bring the entire entrance crashing down, trapping Fletcher and his companion inside. Not fatally. There was an air shaft that would prevent suffocation, but enough to keep them contained until Gabriel could reach the Cedar Creek sheriff. They were halfway to the trigger when disaster struck. Gabriel's boot dislodged a stone, sending it clattering down the slope. The guard's head snapped in their direction. "Who's there?" he called out, raising his pistol. There was no time for subtlety now. Gabriel lunged for the trigger rope, yanking it with all his strength. The effect was immediate and more dramatic than anticipated. A terrible groaning sound followed by a thunderous crash as the mine entrance collapsed in a cloud of dust and debris. The guard shouted in alarm, firing blindly in their direction. Gabriel felt Raven pull him down just as a bullet whizzed past his ear. "Run," he urged her, drawing his own revolver and firing a covering shot. They sprinted toward where they'd left Gabriel's horse, the guard's footsteps pounding behind them. Another shot rang out, splintering bark from a tree inches from Gabriel's head. They reached the horse, Gabriel boosting Raven into the saddle before swinging up behind her. He spurred the animal forward, not daring to look back as they galloped away from the mine and the shouting guard. It wasn't until they'd put considerable distance between themselves and the mine that Gabriel slowed the horse, allowing the winded animal to catch its breath. Raven leaned back against him, her breathing rapid but controlled. "Did we succeed?" Gabriel asked, scanning the trail behind them. "Fletcher and one man are trapped. The other will not leave them," Raven confirmed. It worked as planned. Relief flooded through him, followed quickly by concern. "We need to reach Cedar Creek. Alert the sheriff." "Yes," Raven agreed. "But not together. You must go alone." "What?" "No, I'm not leaving you." She turned in the saddle to face him, her expression resolute. "Think, Gabriel. A white cowboy and an Apache woman arriving together to report men trapped in a mine? Who do you think the sheriff will believe? Who will he arrest?" The truth of her words hit him like a physical blow. Of course she was right. In the eyes of the law, and most of white society, she would be seen as the criminal, regardless of the facts. "Then what do we do?" he asked, frustration evident in his voice. "You go to Cedar Creek. Tell the sheriff you discovered Fletcher and his men attempting to rob the mine, that there was a collapse. I will meet you tomorrow at the place where you first found me, the bend in the Verde River." Gabriel wanted to argue, to insist they stay together, but he knew her plan made the most sense. Still, the thought of separating filled him with an unexpected dread. "Promise me you'll be there," he said, his voice low and urgent. Raven's eyes softened. She reached up, her hand gently touching his cheek. "I promise." Then, in a move that surprised them both, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. A brief, tender kiss that seemed to stop time itself. When she pulled away, her eyes held a mixture of wonder and determination. "Tomorrow," she whispered, sliding from the horse before he could respond. Gabriel watched her disappear into the gathering darkness, the memory of her kiss lingering like a promise. Only when she was completely gone did he turn his horse towards Cedar Creek, his mind racing with possibilities and fears. What if Fletcher somehow escaped before the sheriff arrived? What if Raven didn't come to the meeting place? And most troubling of all, what future could possibly exist for a cowboy and an Apache woman in a world determined to keep them apart? These questions chased each other through his mind as he rode through the night, the medallion's significance now far overshadowed by the woman who carried it, and the unexpected feelings she had awakened in his heart. The Cedar Creek sheriff, a grizzled veteran of both the Civil War and frontier law enforcement, listened to Gabriel's hastily constructed story with skeptical attention. According to Gabriel's account, he'd been tracking strays when he witnessed 3 men attempting to rob the abandoned silver mine. A confrontation ensued, resulting in the accidental collapse that trapped 2 of the men inside. "And you say these fellas were causing trouble in these parts?" the sheriff asked, stroking his salt and pepper beard. "Yes, sir. Heard they were threatening folks, looking for someone to blame for their missing property." Gabriel maintained an earnest expression. "I I recognized the one with the red bandana from the saloon earlier. Name's Fletcher. The sheriff's eyebrows rose. Fletcher, you say? Interesting. He studied Gabriel for a long moment. You know, son, those men were offering a reward for information about an Apache woman. Claimed she stole something valuable. Gabriel shrugged, careful to keep his expression neutral. Can't help you there, Sheriff. I just know what I saw at the mine. After a moment's consideration, the sheriff nodded. All right, I'll gather some men, head out there at first light. Those fellas won't suffocate. There's ventilation in that old mine, but they won't be comfortable neither. He fixed Gabriel with a penetrating stare. You'll be available if I have more questions? Yes, sir. I'm heading back to the double bar tomorrow, but I can delay if needed. That won't be necessary. Just don't leave the territory without letting me know. Gabriel spent a restless night at the town's small hotel, sleep eluding him as he replayed the events of the past 2 days. His life had been upended in ways he couldn't have imagined when he'd first spotted Raven in the river. And now, against all reason, he found himself contemplating possibilities that would have seemed absurd just days ago. Morning arrived with agonizing slowness. Gabriel watched from his window as the sheriff and several deputies rode out toward the mine, their forms diminishing in the distance. Only then did he check out of the hotel and begin his journey to the meeting place, his heart pounding with anticipation and uncertainty. The Verde River glittered in the morning sunlight as Gabriel approached the bend where he'd found Raven. He scanned the area anxiously, seeing no sign of her. Had something happened? Had she decided not to come after all? He dismounted, leading his horse to the water's edge to drink. The waiting was excruciating, each minute stretching like an hour as he paced along the riverbank. Then, just as doubt began to creep in, he caught a glimpse of movement among the cottonwoods. Raven emerged, dressed once more in her traditional clothing, her hair loose around her shoulders. She approached cautiously, her eyes searching his face. You came, she said simply, relief evident in her voice. I promised I would. Gabriel closed the distance between them, resisting the urge to take her hands in his. The sheriff and his deputies rode out to the mine this morning. Fletcher and his men will face justice. Raven nodded, her expression solemn. And when they speak of an Apache woman, it will be their word against mine. And Fletcher doesn't exactly have a sterling reputation. Gabriel hesitated, then added, but it might not be safe for you to remain in this area for a while. No, she agreed. I must leave. She reached into her dress, withdrawing the medallion. The sunlight caught its golden surface, highlighting the intricate engraving. At least I have reclaimed what is rightfully mine. Gabriel watched as she placed the chain around her neck, the medallion resting against her heart. Where will you go? Raven gazed across the river, toward the distant mountains. There are Apache bands in the north who might welcome me. Or perhaps New Mexico territory. She turned back to him, her dark eyes searching his. Unless. Gabriel prompted when she fell silent. Raven took a deep breath. Unless I had reason to stay. The implications of her words hung between them, charged with possibility. Gabriel felt as though he stood at a crossroads. One path leading back to the life he'd known, the other towards something unknown and potentially dangerous, but infinitely more meaningful. What about the double bar? He asked, more to himself than to her. It's been my home for 2 years now. Is it truly home? Raven challenged gently. Or merely a place where you work? The question struck him with unexpected force. In his years of drifting, taking jobs wherever he could find them, he'd never truly put down roots. The double bar was just the latest in a string of ranches where he'd earned his keep. I don't know what I can offer you, he admitted. I'm just a cowboy with little to my name. Raven's expression softened. I am not asking for possessions, Gabriel. I have lived between two worlds all my life, belonging fully to neither. Perhaps, she hesitated, vulnerability evident in her gaze. Perhaps we could find our own place. Together. The simplicity and honesty of her proposal touched something deep within him. In the short time he'd known her, Raven had shown courage, intelligence, and an integrity that far surpassed most people he'd encountered. And there was something else, a connection he couldn't explain, as if they recognized in each other the same loneliness, the same yearning for belonging. It won't be easy, he warned. People won't understand. They rarely do, she replied with a sad smile. But we would understand each other. Perhaps that is enough to begin with. Gabriel reached for her then, drawing her gently into his arms. She came willingly, her body fitting against his as naturally as if they'd embraced 1,000 times before. The medallion pressed between them, warm from her skin. "Yes," he whispered against her hair. "It's enough." 5 years later, northwestern Arizona territory, the small homestead nestled in the shadow of the Mogollon Rim, caught the last rays of the setting sun, its adobe walls glowing golden in the fading light. A curl of smoke rose from the chimney, carrying the scent of pinyon pine into the crisp autumn air. Gabriel Zimmerman stood on the porch, watching as two horses approached along the winding trail. His hand rested instinctively on the revolver at his hip, a habit born of the frontier's uncertainties, though visitors to their remote home were rare. As the riders drew closer, his tension eased, recognition dawning. He turned toward the open door behind him. "Raven," he called. "It's Tom and Sarah." Moments later, Raven appeared beside him, wiping her hands on her apron. At 28, she remained as striking as the day he'd pulled her from the river, though the years had added a quiet confidence to her bearing. The gold medallion still hung around her neck, a constant reminder of where their journey together had begun. "I told you they would come," she said, a smile warming her features. "Sarah never breaks a promise." Gabriel slipped his arm around her waist, marveling as he often did at how their lives had unfolded. After leaving the Verde River that fateful day 5 years ago, they had traveled north, eventually finding this secluded valley where the boundaries between territories and cultures seemed less rigid. It hadn't been easy. They'd faced prejudice, suspicion, and outright hostility from many quarters. But they'd also found unexpected allies, like Tom Wilson, the former cavalry officer who'd left military life to establish a trading post 30 miles to the east, and his wife Sarah, a teacher who'd befriended Raven despite the raised eyebrows of other white settlers. The riders dismounted in the yard, Tom's booming voice carrying easily. "Hope we're not too late. Sarah wouldn't rest until we delivered this ourselves." Gabriel descended the steps to greet them, clasping Tom's hand warmly. "You're just in time. Raven's made enough stew to feed a regiment." Sarah approached Raven, her arms laden with a carefully wrapped bundle. "I finished it yesterday," she announced proudly, presenting the package. "Just as I promised." Raven accepted the gift, carefully unwrapping the layers of cloth to reveal a handmade quilt, a wedding gift, though their union had no official documentation beyond their own private vows and the acceptance of a few friends. "It's beautiful," Raven breathed, admiring the intricate pattern that cleverly incorporated both traditional Anglo designs and elements reminiscent of Apache weaving. "Thank you, Sarah." The two women embraced while Tom clapped Gabriel on the shoulder. "How's the horse breeding business? Any buyers for those Appaloosas you've been raising?" 3 sales last month," Gabriel confirmed as they moved toward the house. Word spreading. "Turns out Raven's knowledge of Apache horse medicine gives us an edge. Our foals are hardier than most." Inside, the one-room cabin was modest but comfortable, with a blend of furnishings that reflected both their backgrounds. A traditional Apache wedding basket hung on one wall, while Gabriel's old saddle occupied a stand by the door. The scent of cornbread and stew filled the warm space. As they settled around the rough-hewn table, a small sound from the corner drew Sarah's attention. She gasped in delight at the sight of the cradle Gabriel had crafted from cottonwood, and the tiny occupant who had just awakened. "Oh, I was hoping we'd get here before she fell asleep," Sarah exclaimed, looking to Raven for permission. Raven nodded, and Sarah hurried to the cradle, gently lifting the 3-month-old infant. The baby blinked owlishly, her features a perfect blend of her parents'. Gabriel's blue eyes startling in her olive-toned face, wisps of black hair already thick on her small head. "Hello, little Elena," Sarah cooed, returning to the table with the baby cradled expertly in her arms. You've grown since I saw you last." Tom leaned forward to inspect the infant with exaggerated seriousness. "Strong girl. She'll be riding before you know it, Gabriel." Gabriel watched his daughter with undisguised wonder, a feeling that hadn't diminished since the moment of her birth. "She already has her mother's determination." Raven smiled at that, reaching to touch the medallion at her throat, a gesture she made often, especially when contemplating the journey that had brought them here. "And her father's kindness," she added softly. As the evening progressed, filled with good food and better company. Gabriel found himself reflecting on the extraordinary chain of events that had led to this moment. Had he taken a different route that day? Had he not noticed Raven in the river? Had he made any number of different choices along the way? None of this would exist. Later, after their guests had departed for the spare cabin Gabriel had built for visitors, and Elena was once again sleeping peacefully, he stood with Raven by the door, gazing at the star-filled sky. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Choosing this life with me?" Raven turned to him, her expression serious. "Do you remember what you said to me at the river, when we were deciding whether to stay together?" Gabriel nodded, recalling the moment with perfect clarity. "I said I didn't know what I could offer you. And I said I wasn't asking for possessions." She took his hand, placing it over the medallion, and her heart. "This has been passed down through generations of my mother's family. It is said to bring its bearer to their true destiny." Her eyes, dark and luminous in the moonlight, held his. "You are my destiny, Gabriel Zimmerman. You and Elena, and whatever future we create together." He drew her close, still marveling at how perfectly they fit together despite the differences the world saw between them. "When I pulled you from that river, I never imagined where it would lead." Raven smiled against his chest. "That day, you did not simply revive a drowned Apache woman. You awakened a life neither of us knew was possible." As they stood together under the vast Arizona sky, Gabriel knew she was right. In saving Raven, he had ultimately saved himself from a life of drifting, of never truly belonging. Together, they had created something rare and precious on this frontier, a home built not on the expectations of others, but on their own terms, bridging worlds that few believed could coexist. And as Elena's soft breathing mingled with the night sounds around their homestead, Gabriel felt a certainty that had eluded him for most of his life. This was where he belonged. This was what it meant to be truly home.